Welcome to the story, Seeking Autumn Across Vast Distances, an artistic journey reimagined through the lens of Post-Impressionism, the revolutionary late 19th century art movement, where the artist's emotions and individuality burst forth vividly. Unlike Impressionism, Post-Impressionism breaks free from natural light, exaggerating the world through unnatural colors, Van Gogh's blazing yellows, Gauguin's electric greens, crafting dreamlike scenes, passionate brushstrokes. From Seurat's pointillist dots to the swirling spirals of starry night, each stroke breathes life into the canvas. Stylized forms, Cézanne transforms hills into cubic shapes, paving the way for modern art. Picture Van Gogh's Wheat Field with Crows, or Gauguin's Tahitian Women. You'll feel the raw power of color and emotion. Which style would you like the next story to be painted in? Art Nouveau or Surrealism? Leave a comment. Your suggestion might inspire the next illustration.
Liu Puong Hoa, a native of Baojin, was the wealthiest man in the village. Generous by nature and fond of hosting, he often gathered 100 guests at his banquets. He was ever ready to assist those in distress, never sparing silver or gold. That guests and friends borrowed from him without repayment was a commonplace occurrence. Only one guest stood apart, Kung Mong Bat, a man from Thiem Thai, who, from beginning to end, never once begged a favor or asked to borrow a single coin. He came once for a visit, then stayed on for years. Quiet and dignified in speech, his presence was composed and sincere. Thus, Liu came to enjoy conversing and living with him far more than with any other guest. Liu's son was named Hoa. At the time, he was still a young boy and always called Kung uncle. Kung, in turn, delighted in playing with him. Whenever Hoa returned from school, the two would pry up the floor tiles in the house and bury fragments of stone beneath, pretending they were hiding gold and silver, a game they both found great joy in. The house had many rooms, and the digging and burying took place everywhere. Others laughed it off as childish mischief, but no one was dearer to Hoa than Kung, and no playmate more cherished. 10 years later, the household had declined somewhat, and could no longer satisfy the lavish demands of its many guests. As a result, visitors grew few and far between. Even so, there remained gatherings of 20 or 30 people who would sit drinking tea, chatting, and feasting until dawn, a common sight. As Liu grew older, the household continued to decline, yet he still sold off parcels of farmland bit by bit, using the proceeds to buy chickens and set out wine and meals whenever guests arrived. Hoa too took after his father's extravagant ways. He would invite his young friends over in droves. Liu knew all of this, but never once tried to stop him. Not long after, Liu fell ill and passed away. The household was so impoverished that there wasn't even enough money to arrange the funeral. Kung took it upon himself to cover all the costs from his own pocket. For this, Hoa felt all the more indebted, entrusting his uncle with every matter, great or small. Each time Kung returned from his travels, he would bring with him a small bundle of broken tiles or rubble, which he tossed into a corner of the house. No one in the family understood what it meant. Hoa often lamented his poverty to Kung. Kung replied,
"You don't know how hard and bitter real work is. Even if someone handed you 1,000 pieces of gold right now, you'd squander it all in no time. A young man's only real worry should be whether he can stand on his own 2 feet, not whether he is."
One day, Kung bid farewell. Hoa cried and begged him to return soon. Kung nodded, then left. Hoa sank into such poverty that even daily meals became scarce. He pawned whatever he could, until nothing remained to sell. Each day he waited for Uncle Kung to return, hoping he would help. But Kung vanished without a trace, like a golden crane that flew off and never came back. Back when Liu was still alive, he had arranged a betrothal for Hoa with the daughter of the wealthy Huing family from Vokuk district. But once they heard that Liu had fallen into poverty, the Huings quietly began to turn their backs and prepare to break their word. When Liu died, the family sent out funeral notices. Hin ignored them entirely and sent no offering or condolences. Everyone assumed it was due to the great distance and gave him the benefit of the doubt. When the mourning period ended, Hoa's mother sent him to the bride's family to request a wedding date, hoping that Huyen, seeing their hardship, might show compassion and support his future son-in-law. But when Hoa arrived, dressed in shabby clothes and worn shoes, Huyen quietly instructed the gatekeeper not to let him in. Instead, he sent a message by word of mouth. "Go find 100 silver coins and come back. Otherwise, from this day forward, consider all ties severed." Hoa heard the message and burst into bitter sobs. Madame Lu, an old woman who lived across the street, took pity on him. She called him into her house, offered him some betel to warm his body, and told him there was no need to return to his hometown. When he got home, he recounted everything to his mother. She, too, was filled with grief and resentment. But there was nothing she could do. At that time, many former guests still owed their family money. Of 10, perhaps 8 or 9 had yet to repay. So she told Hoa to seek out the wealthier ones and ask them for help in return. But Hoa shook his head.
"Mother, back then they visited and befriended us only because our house was rich. If today I rode in a fine carriage or mounted a noble steed, borrowing 1,000 in gold would be no trouble. But now that we're poor and destitute, who would remember old debts and past kindness? And besides, when father lent money in his lifetime, he never kept any records. How could I possibly go and demand it now?"
But his mother insisted, so Hoa spent over 20 days going from house to house, yet could not recover even a single coin. Only one person, a theatrical singer named Li Tu, who still remembered the kindness Liu had shown him long ago, gave Hoa a silver piece as a token of gratitude. Mother and son sat together weeping. From that day on, they fell into despair with no hope left to cling to. But his mother insisted, so Hoa spent over 20 days going from house to house, yet could not recover even a single coin. Only one person, a theatrical singer named Li Tu, who still remembered the kindness Liu had shown him long ago, gave Hoa a silver piece as a token of gratitude. Mother and son sat together weeping. From that day on, they fell into despair with no hope left to cling to. Now as for Huyen's daughter, she had come of age and was ready for marriage. When she heard that her father had broken off ties with Hoa, she secretly believed it was wrong. Huyen wished to marry her off to another man, but she wept and said,
"Father Liu's son was not born into poverty. If now his household were many times wealthier than it once was, no one would dare contend with him for my hand. But because he is poor, and we cast him aside, that is heartless. Father."
But Huyen would not listen. He made up excuse after excuse and tried every manner of persuasion, yet his daughter would not waver. Both husband and wife grew angry at her and scolded her from morning to night, but she remained silent. Not long after, in the middle of the night, robbers attacked their house. They burned and tortured with boiling irons, interrogated Huyen and his wife nearly to death, then ransacked the home, leaving it utterly stripped bare. 3 years passed in a flash, and the family's fortunes declined even further. A shop owner, having heard of her beauty, offered 5,000 coins to take her as his wife. Blinded by the sum, Huyen readily agreed and resolved to force his daughter into the marriage at any cost. But she uncovered the scheme. She disfigured her own face, smeared it with filth, and under the cover of night fled the house. For 2 long months she begged her way along the roads until at last she reached Baojin. There she asked the neighbors and went straight to Hoa's home. At first sight, Hoa's mother thought she was just another beggar and scolded her away. The girl choked with tears and gave her name. The old woman grasped her hand, broke into sobs, and said, "Poor child, how did your body come to such a state?" She poured out her story with heartfelt emotion. The 2 women cried together. Once their tears had run dry, the old woman fetched water and washed the girl clean. Her face brightened again, her beauty returned, and mother and daughter-in-law rejoiced. But in that house of 3 mouths to feed, they had only 1 meal a day. Hoa's mother, full of pity, could not hold back her tears. We, mother and son, are used to hardship. But what pains me is that such a virtuous daughter-in-law must now endure it with us. She smiled and comforted her mother-in-law.
I never chased lofty dreams. I mingled with beggars and wanderers, tasted suffering in its rawest form, mother. Compared to that, this life now feels like the distance between heaven and hell.
Hearing those words, the old woman felt comforted. One day, the girl entered the house that had long been abandoned. Grass had grown wild, leaving no open space. She made her way slowly inside, where dust and debris filled the rooms. In a corner of the house, something had been piled up. Her foot struck against it. She bent down to look, and to her astonishment, it was all silver and coin. Stunned, she ran off to call Hoa. Hearing those words, the old woman felt comforted. One day, the girl entered the house that had long been abandoned. Grass had grown wild, leaving no open space. She made her way slowly inside, where dust and debris filled the rooms. In a corner of the house, something had been piled up. Her foot struck against it. She bent down to look, and to her astonishment, it was all silver and coin. Stunned, she ran off to call Hoa. But that old house had already been pawned to someone in the eastern quarter. Hoa rushed to redeem it with the silver they had just found. When he began digging, he discovered that the stones buried beneath the old floor tiles were all silver as well. Who would have thought that in the blink of an eye they would amass a fortune in tens of thousands? From then on, he redeemed all the family's lands, built a new house, and filled it with bustling servants, male and female. The residence became even grander and more splendid than in its former days. Hoa, filled with determination and pride, declared, "Heaven above, if I do not strive to make a name for myself, how unworthy I would be of Uncle Kung's kindness."
And so, after years of hardship, Hoa, once a carefree boy playing buried treasure with Uncle Kung, finally found his turning point. With the hidden fortune uncovered and his family's honor restored, he vowed to change his fate. Books replaced reckless days, and determination burned in his heart. But what awaits him next? Will he pass the imperial exams? Can love reunite him with Huin's loyal daughter? And what secret did Uncle Kung truly leave behind? Subscribe now to follow Hoa's journey in the next chapter, where ambition, love, and destiny collide.